And now it's time for a WebBot report. He calls it, he not really titles it, but it says Stay Tuned April 2016, covering 2016 to 2030. Again, I get new subscribers every single day, so I have to give a little disclaimer. The WebBot will give dates many times, time frames. Sometimes they're spot on, sometimes they're off by sometimes considerable amounts of time. But usually what it's talking about is spot on. It's just the timing's wrong. Sometimes it's not, and sometimes it just is a miss. But over the years of following this thing, I've seen way too many things happen that there's no way this thing could have guessed and just got it right. And in recent times, it's been quite right with a lot of small things that it mentioned to look out for. When I say small things, just things that happen, like, okay, great, but then we're looking for some bigger things to happen that haven't quite happened yet. But those other things did. So, here we go. The new sets processed for this report are being dominated in their individual sets by supporting language for acceleration. The rising focus within the data for quickening and speeding up and rapidity and rate of acceleration are but a few of the many references to the idea that we are all going to be feeling the pace of events moving faster than ever before in our lives. And I'm going to spend the next few paragraphs on the Terra entity, or Earth changes, weather, things like that. I normally don't spend a lot of time on that stuff because I want to focus on markets and gold and silver and maybe political stuff, whatever's in there. But this time I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that because there's some big changes, I think, coming to planet Earth that you may want to prepare for. And honestly, there's a lot in this report. Again, it's like the last two reports were pretty interesting. This is another one, but again, I can't read the whole thing. It's just a summary. There's things I completely left out. And if you want it, go to halfpasthuman.com and buy the report. They're usually like $15. I think something just flew out of my mouth. Another soon-to-be daily heard word will be consequences. This word is or will be showing up trailing our rapidity word set, but packing far more gravitas. Also look for this to reemerge. And emotional depth. The consequences word will be with us for nearly a decade, according to the projections within the longer-term values. These sets are suggesting that real-life consequences of past sins will continue to pop up over the next 10 years as the rot is excised from the various control systems currently in place, mostly within the US dollar-based empire of paper debt. The consequences attribute appearance is supportive of the metadata layer of revolution. The revolution is showing as being of an emotional level more intense and more long-lasting than both the previous American and French revolutions combined. The data sets are showing that this current, now started and now moving forward, revolution has more cyclic intensity and longer-lasting, more society-changing, more staying power effects than the Industrial Revolution. The datasets are also forecasting a summer of storms for Northern Hemisphere that will be unparalleled in recent centuries' history. These storms are described as being both of extraordinary intensity and out of place. Many of the descriptors are for tornadoes in very odd places. These also include waterspouts forming on inland rivers. Further issues will include debris rains from these storms. In at least one instance, the data is forecasting a rain of biohazard materials that will apparently be marked with the biohazard badges. This will, as many may be expected, cause no end of worry and local fright as the event is reported. Other weather-related problems are showing as coming from the sky or to the sky, depending, as weather is indicated to bring down airplanes and other flying objects, over populated areas in the southeast USA and Taiwan, Southeast Asia areas. These occurrences are due apparently to sudden and completely unexpected I love that word. The market unexpectedly came down to unexpected icing conditions when it should or could not happen theoretically. Other Terra entity forecasts include yet more bad air bites incidents. And some of the new sets are indications that several large vessel ships will have mentally and physically incapacitated crews and passengers due to passing through a bad air bubble, so to speak. The data sets are showing that bad air over ocean waters, northern Pacific mostly, is going to go unreported for a long while, then suddenly make headlines repeatedly as the first of several cruise ships will also encounter bad air bubbles at sea. The number of people affected is showing as large enough to overwhelm the ability of onshore assistance to be rendered. As well as the sky-falling datasets, we also have the oceans rebelling sets growing. The datasets are showing that oceanic death, especially in the Pacific and Caribbean, will escalate to the point that fisheries are stopped. The issues will be cited as the death of the plankton layer as well as zooplankton poisoning. I'm going to stop for 1 second because I just read very recently California has shut down, crabbing season indefinitely. Reason given? Oh, it must be Fukushima radiation. No. Reason given? There's a algae-like thing causing a toxicity or something or another within the crab, and if we eat the crab, it's toxic to humans. They shut down the whole season. And that's funny because they shut down other ones a while back, and then some more before that, different types of fish. They were shutting those down, and this one ended early and all. So on one hand, the government's trying to do the right thing, at least at the lower levels, and stop people from eating the toxic, as in radioactive freaking fish life, seafood, but not willing to tell you the truth. That a epic radiological event has happened. Fukushima, 2011, you remember that. And it is spewed all inside the ocean from those reactors. They were all, practically all of them, from what I remember, at least two or three I think for sure, were in meltdown mode. They melted down. We don't have any fuel. We don't know where, gone. And if you look at the currents, it goes up and down along the Californian coast, where all of these stories I'm telling you about are happening. You couldn't pay me thousands of ounces of silver to go swimming or get in that water even once. Okay? Now, where was I? The issue will be cited as the death of the plankton layer as well as the zooplankton poisoning. In much of the northern hemisphere, the data is showing 2016 as the last year of fish on the plate. There are cross-links here that go to the powers that be entity, which the data sets are showing that fish and seafood is going to gain new context as a health food for the elite as the stocks disappear and only the ultra-wealthy can afford to eat vanishing species. The cross-links to the ocean health problems are also extensively cross-linked over to the self-organizing tribes, collectives, subsets of global pop entity, where the terminating sets are within the formation circumstances of creation of the new coastal tribes here in North America and maybe in Australia as well. Another thing to keep in mind real quick, as I read this and I go from paragraph to paragraph, I may have skipped huge amounts of the report and just continued on, so it may not sound fluidly like I'm going down like I should. The data also continues to accrue to oceans death, fisheries gone as of 2016, and economy of ocean changed and ocean currents change. The global demand for almost everything within the data is being forecast as falling, such that 2016 will be the year of the largest ever global layoffs. The data is indicating that not only China, but most countries throughout the globe will be in a net job loss mode rather than net job gain. Unless you're an American. If you're American, you turn on the TV. Obama just said recently, anyone that says the economy and anything is bad, you're peddling fiction, he said. 5% unemployment, son. if you believe that horse shit. Another thing I've been wondering about, real estate, housing prices. Not looking good. The global real estate crash is cross-linked to a number of sets suggesting that the real estate markets and overvaluation will be the blame words for a number of other general markets and general economy problems. These are also indicated to flush out old/long-standing corruption as the economic activity and speed decrease. The detail sets are showing that failures in insurance companies will leave exposed corruption as true ownership and false deeds are made public. And I don't know necessarily that it means deeds as in deeds to a house, or deeds like you committed a bad deed, or as sometimes the webbot gets, both. Other instances of corrupt banking are indicated to expose global politicians' corruption. In these latter, hang on, I just had to move this. In these latter sets are supporting linguistic structures that include descriptions of mobs moving at night to surround politicians' house and haul them out, beating them along the way. Other sets, and this isn't necessarily America, this is like the global pop entity, I believe. Other sets are of similar vein. There are enough of these supporting sets, and their cross-links extensive enough to warrant an interpretation of a wave of such events as various local economies come under severe stress as the global banking system becomes unglued. Power? Question mark. Got electricity? Question mark. Especially in Japan? Question mark. The data sets are suggesting that a number of nuclear problems are going to be besetting the planet as 2016 progresses toward 2017. In both years, the nuclear radiation exposure is showing as doubling for most life in the northern hemisphere. In many of the new sets for leaking radiation, the data sets are showing that a long-term process of exposure has begun, and that many of the nuclear plants will be sources for global exposure for decades. These sets include new supporting sets for evacuations in areas in North America that will then become problems for Europe as the radiation leakage blows east. The electrical problems are showing as not limited to Japan nor to nuclear power plants. In many other sets, we have the destruction of the credit system as being a global, mostly Western world, casual agent for rationed electrical service. In many of these sets, we have global pop reacting badly to the favorable circumstances, special privilege, rationing. In these latter sets, the detail shows that the elites not being subjected to electrical or other rationing, as they will claim fortuitous circumstances, such as living near a hospital and being on the same vital electrical circuit as necessary government. As model space has moved the present through the rest of 2016, the global pop entity shows a building of the gold fever meme. Hold on. As the visible shift in the gold to all other claimed assets moves into a higher gear over the last bit of winter and into spring, northern hemisphere, the data shows that global gold fever starts expressing itself in various forms out of both the propaganda media and the alternative media. Some of these forms are showing as gold prospecting in very unlikely places, as well as a great many new reports of new forms of gold robberies. Some of these sets include descriptors for gold theft from major banks/corporations. Other sets show a rush to prospect will be a significant part of the gold fever. Lots of videos of prospecting, both successful and fatally bad, will be making their way to the social media outlets as the gold fever begins to take hold of the global population psyche. USA Pop. The state of the USA Pop is showing as getting very much harder due to imposition of capital controls. These are indicated as being sneaky and midnight plot to be placed upon the USA population before the elections. The first data within these capital controls sets shows up in late May, and from that point forward, steady growth occurs. The capital controls set becomes a rising supporting secondary subset that the USA Pop entity to the USA Pop entity by late October. This is an indication that the language will be commonly discussed by that point as the population reacts to domination by dying banks. As model space has progressed through March and April into spring, Northern Hemisphere, the data shows that the dollar wobble becomes quite severe, and it in its turn is triggering the hysterical, wonky behavior of trading machines, such as software high-frequency trading platforms. The data within the markets entity is cross-linked back over to the USA Pop entity, where the terminating sets are dominated by aspects of extremes of volatility and snapping of trading links, such that software and algorithms become both unbound or range-free and base loose, no longer tied to base range behavior. These sets are gaining new supporting sets in the areas of wild ride and wild gyrations and wild fall and other language around the idea of an out-of-control process, which is at the core of the definition of wild at its emotional tone level within the lexicon. The data sets are showing that the USA Pop will not be receptive to the officialdom BS explanations for the rapidly crumbling financial system, and is forecast as being negatively disposed to the last and greatest round of quantitative easing. That will be moved into place as we move into July, at least according to his model space data. Could it be next year, July? It could be. It appears to be this year, July. We can only wait and see. These sets in this area are suggesting that by August, the headlines will be about the failure of debt creation at levels never before seen, nor understood, as quantitative easing 5 fails and explodes on liftoff. The detail sets are suggesting that the ability to make debt is/has gone away, and that this is going to be labeled as limp currency. While this is ongoing, the data is also showing that the rapidly falling purchasing power of the dollar is also generating pressure/stress on USA Pop. The data sets are showing that the USA Pop will be reeling and complaining about as much as 1% per day levels of loss of value of the dollar, not knowing that a mere few weeks later, the rate of loss will be over 4% in a day. Most of the language forecasting the bad behavior does not directly acknowledge the dollar degradation as the cause, but as model spaces move through into October, there is language about dissecting the summer crises for understanding of just what the hell happened. Boy, I hope you got some precious metals. As model spaces move through March and April, the data accrues in several new sets for breakouts in the precious metals, as well as breakdowns of key indicators for the Federal Reserve note, aka dollar. The data is forecasting that gold will be bouncing up on higher lows throughout March and into April, as it generally moves upward. There are new sets for the surge in prices for gold and silver over May and June that then goes into another period of higher lows for both metals in early July that seems to hold until near mid-August. At this point, the data is indicating that the surges upward in US dollar price begins again. Unlike the May and June price action, the data sets are not showing any slowdown in the next few months once the fall rush upward begins. Fall as in fall time, winter, spring, summer, fall. All you have to do is call. There are detail sets describing places within the continental U.S. that will be going native or using wampum as it will become known due to the liquidity shortage and the dollar instability and the reaction by the Federal Reserve and the federal government. These details show such things as cars and property, including houses, businesses, and inventories, will be traded, sold, and bought in ways that do not use the Federal Reserve note or dollar. The data sets further are showing that the local governments in many of these areas are going to try to implement forced attendance policies in which they pay the employees in redeemable script. The catch to the whole thing is that the idea that local police and state highway patrol units will be sent out to retrieve certain errant employees of government who decide to stage a sick out or sick day, or hey, we're all calling in sick today kind of a thing. Again, the data forecasts a bad outcome. In other areas of the USA Pop, the new growth includes sets that describe a more or less functioning transition away from the Federal Reserve note over the course of 2016-2017 as the financial crises deepen into global depression and global political chaos. In these instances, the data is showing that the local population takes a pragmatic approach to dealing with global financial chaos and more or less makes it, quote, work, in spite of no circulating paper currencies. In many of these linguistic structures, Bitcoin and precious metals are both repeatedly referenced. India Pop. That's a new one, isn't it? Maybe he's mentioned India. Data sets continue to grow for conjoining sets of corruption and bankruptcy. I'm going to venture and say that probably all major countries, not even major, all countries are going to have a little corruption problem because all countries have this thing called government and this other thing called politicians that go hand in hand. These sets are pointing toward a failure of the Indian government past debt commitments that will be showing up as very bad indeed, derivatives related, of course, and then in conjunction the corruption of past officialdom will be seen as a causative factor within the bankruptcy proceedings. This becomes increasingly important to the markets entity as a court case is discussed, pre-trial words it says, and Indian government actions trigger a flight from fear in capital that will break down several of the key levels within the gold/silver markets. These sets are cross-linked to the markets entity and suggest that several large funds from India will be catching gold fever and will demand to take delivery. These sets are suggesting that there will be a crisis within the global currency markets and the global metals markets as a result of concurrent with the Indian capital flight. These sets are showing that a flood will be making the news in the background as a flood of US dollars attempt to take away all the available gold. New technologies and new biological uses and other sets are all part of the data forecasting that silver premiums will be going over 100% of the spot price that is fixed, as they call it. The real price will be determined by Asian demand as several times the spot price. Several times the spot price. Wow. The data sets are suggesting that this will occur before the end of this year, 2016. Model Space would have the process be underway now, with some significant steps in silver price to become manifest over late March as spring, Northern Hemisphere, brings on significant markets changes. Data sets are growing in support of a fractured market that will be so disassociated and jangled at one point that the propaganda media will be forced to report several official prices for silver and gold at any given time. These sets are showing that fractured officialdom in financial central banking world will have caused confusion amongst the reporters for the propaganda media and induced something of an aversion to discussing silver on air to the extent that personalities will scuffle in front of cameras as staff try to remove them for bringing up silver. The rapidity and the strength of the price rise in silver force the subject on the reluctant media, but the longer-term data is showing that officialdom within North America declares silver in all forms to be a strategic metal and a necessary domestic resource, and then limitations on exporting silver are imposed. This may occur as early as late 2016 or first quarter 2017. The data sets are showing that the industrial corporate users of silver will have plenty of needs for silver and no blockages to paying going rates. The data is showing that Asian industrial demand for silver will be such that prices over $120 will find willing buyers in the multitudes as solar power and new electrics, new energy type things, uses for silver reach a crescendo. 2 more paragraphs and I'm done. As model space has progressed through 2016, the gold, silver, Bitcoin wave appears as upward moves that begin in late March, progress through April, and hit a small peak in late May. Then, as the officialdom reacts to developing issues, including the fracturing political system, there is a calm period that shows as a settling down or calming down of the rush into gold. So over the course of June and early July, as there are major geographic, tectonic, and geopolitical attention-grabbing events, the data is showing that the rate of advance for gold slows down. However, it is at this point in mid-July that silver gets its emotional legs, where the need to acquire silver begins to overwhelm both the retail distribution network and the last energy towards price suppression. Then, within a background context of early-stage hyperinflation, the data is showing that gold and silver and Bitcoin all start upward moves that will apparently persist for a number of years. The data sets are forecasting that a good temporal marker is going to be the suicide of a banking regulator who will nearly instantly be found to be criminally dirty. This temporal marker will be a kickoff for the banking shares markets getting to the panic to sell and pain for speculators, noting the seeming connection between Bitcoin at 408 and the bottom for silver in price for silver likely was a fulfilled forecast, though not able to be confirmed for a number of weeks yet by price action. The data sets have a clear hook between silver and Bitcoin that is forecasting that a rapid rise in both will be dominating the market's discussions as we move from April into May. The forecast for both silver and Bitcoin for the rest of the year involves a calmer period in midsummer, that is followed by a series of price surges as various geopolitical and financial system manifestations occur. These are showing as including oil kingdom failures that have impacts reaching very far into the future. That, my friends, is your summary. Again, if you want to purchase it, the full thing, which is way longer than what I just read you, a lot more information, different things I didn't even cover. halfpasthuman.com. Cliff High owns the stuff, the site, the web reports. He's nice enough to give them to me, lets me do a brief summary, a brief as in like 30 minutes or less. Again, if you want to know the full thing, you can get it from him. That's really about it. Take it easy.